Hi, hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of my content on the subject of love, relationship, of course, marriage. So, on today's edition, I'm going to be talking about some red flags I ignored and what happened. Itchy ears, yeah? Okay, but before I go to the main gist, I like to drop side stories just to drive my message home. Okay, so if you use public transport, yeah, you might be familiar with drivers and passengers drama on the road, which is often because they did not properly negotiate the fare before the journey started. And then something interesting is that the passenger is always at the losing side of the bargain if they fail to negotiate properly before joining the bus. Yeah. Because if you join the bus without telling the driver, hey, see waiting I get to, by the time you get to your bus stop, you'll be at the mercy of the driver. And then if you like drama, fight don't bust. So, but to avoid unnecessary drama, it is very important that you negotiate. It's not by force. If you tell the driver he calls a certain amount for you and you say, no, I don't have it, he moves. You also move and join another bus. You get. And sometimes you discover they don't even really have specific prices at the end of the day. You just have to strike a deal that works for you and join the bus. Get to your destination, get down in peace and go your way. I've seen real drama. Hmm? When I say real drama, like tear cloth kind of drama on the roads because the driver and the passenger failed to negotiate before beginning the journey. Okay, back to the main gist. Very important topic, I think. So, some red flags I ignored and got into a relationship. And what happened? Okay, first off, in no particular order. First off, it was the issue of, okay, in the first instance, yeah, I wasn't ready. I wasn't exactly ready or give this particular instance a proper thought. That was my first relationship, yeah. So it was not a really thoughtful decision I made. It was like an on the spot kind of thing. I just got into it like on the spot. I'm like, ah, let us give it a try. I was very spontaneous with it. Like, let me see what I've never even really dated before then. Just like, well, let me see what dating looks like. Of course, we had in mind that it was going to end in marriage, but purpose was not clearly defined. And I knew from the depth of my heart that this person was not exactly my spec. I'm not being unrealistic here. I mean, like my non-negotiables. I just sort of flowed with the tide. You get. I did not properly think about it. I didn't give it real thought. Am I willing to go on a permanent journey with this person? It was just like a spontaneous thing, like what teenagers would do. And along the line, I started to feel lost, like I'm on the wrong path, like I didn't think this through. It kept reoccurring. I kept feeling lost, like I'm in the wrong place. I kept feeling out of touch with my purpose. And to be frank, my spiritual life witnessed a downward spiral, you get, in couple of ways. So yeah, that was the first instance I'm giving, the first red flag I ignored. And what happened? I ignored the fact that this is not exactly, especially spiritually speaking, I have a picture in my head. Not that I'm looking for a spirit couple or something, but I wanted at least a spiritual leader, someone who was conscious about being led by God. It was so important to me. But at the spur of the moment, I threw that to the backyard and jumped into something that was, I didn't really give it thought. And the consequence was that along the line, I started to feel lost. I started to feel like I was out of touch with my purpose and I had to like run for my life. It was not easy to get out because emotions were already invested and all. It wasn't easy. But the fact I could not deny was I started feeling so lost, so out of touch with my purpose, and I lost my peace, in fact. So I had to find my way out, but it was devastating for both of us. But I had to at least make a U-turn when it has not become permanent. Amen. Okay. Number two, also very interesting. I'm so happy that I can talk about this so casually. But in the moment, they were not funny experiences. You get, but what are gists for our learning and entertainment? Okay. So in the second instance, yeah, it was about faith, about um, doctrine, about approach to the Christian faith. You get. So over time in my adult life, I started becoming exposed, you know, and then I started building a faith um, perspective that was a bit of a far cry from what I grew up with. I grew up in a very conservative church. So at some point in my adult life, I began to be more exposed, listen to more preachers, and I started to develop a very dynamic approach or perspective to the faith. And then I knew within me that this place where I am now, I might not be able to last here for the long time because my beliefs have been transformed. I'm not going to go into details, at least not maybe just for another day. But I knew for certain that this place could no longer accommodate my growth. You get. But then I struggled with it. I mean, I grew up here. Everybody knows me. I'm a very committed person. I knew it was going to break hearts. And here I was with this person I was seriously talking to. We're actually um, dating. Fun fact, dating is not even allowed in this assembly in this church. So it was like an outlaw kind of thing. And I even felt like I don't quite agree that people shouldn't date you get until maybe they call it courtship, which is fine. But it's just a whole different approach to the whole marriage, a more streamlined approach, which is fine, but I didn't quite align with that approach. So couple of times it will come up in our conversations. Like I'll be like, I don't feel like I'm going to be here for the long term. How am I going to cope? I don't quite agree with all these doctrines, with all these approaches to the faith. And it was supposed to be a big deal, yeah. But even though the conversations kept coming, but we were not ready to deal with it. Because guess what? Mushy mushy was already involved. Emotions were already involved. So we 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 sort of brushed that conversation aside. I mean, but we both knew it was going to be a major factor. Okay, if in the future I decide I don't want to worship here anymore based off of my convictions, how is it going to be? Are you going to accommodate a rebellious wife? Do you get so serious issues? I think, but we didn't get to trash it out because we had become overwhelmed by emotions and all. But guess what? At the end of the day, I knew I couldn't do this anymore. I lost my peace. I felt like this is not my place. And other factors, though, other factors came up and the relationship could not get to the next level. But then it was something that could have been avoided at the early stages if we had had these real conversations, you know, and talk about our non-negotiables. Because really, for me, the matter of the approach to the faith was a non-negotiable for me. I thought I could manage. I thought that my love was big enough to accommodate that. But thinking about it, It was something unimaginable. I knew I was going to struggle, and then coupled with other factors, we had to go our separate ways. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I tell you the truth, I kid you not. It wasn't easy. Okay. Lastly, is something my pastor called the halo effect. So I met this person, and the first impression was awesome. It was giving 10 on 10 minus nothing. I mean, based off of my spec. I'm very particular about someone who is intentional about being led by God, not in a very special way or something extraordinary, but someone who is just careful to be aligned with God. I love that so much from my man. So yeah, I met this person and he was already sounding, we don't want anything. We're just all about doing the will of God. I'm like, that's like my favorite word, to be in the will of God, to be in sync, to be aligned with God. And just be like, say, you know, it's just what the halo effect is about. You get so enthusiastic or fascinated by a particular trait that you admire so much, and it sort of blindsides you to their errors, to their flaws. You're sort of totally distracted from their flaws. They seem to have this perfect image because they've ticked one very special box of yours. So yeah, that happened. So along the line, I realized this guy, when there was conflict, did like a 180-degree switch, you get, and talks to me in a way that is very condescending, disrespectful. In the first instance, I could not wrap my head around it, but something about the halo effect made me ignore it, made me not to think so much, not to overthink it, but it's continued. But remember, I was already fascinated. I've been trapped by that halo effect of, this guy is so into God and all about the will of God and all. So it took a while. It took 6 months for me to decide, no, I cannot deal with somebody who does not know how to deal during conflicts. Do you know how important that is? I mean, because there are no perfect relationships. In all forms of relationships, conflicts abound. Conflicts are a necessary part of relationship. So if we're not going to deal with conflicts maturely in a loving way, then I don't know. I don't think it was wise to even contemplate doing something permanent. You get. So yeah, in the earlier days, I ignored this reaction, unpleasant reaction or extreme reactions in the face of conflict, like the tone changes, and I'm like, what sort of? I could not make sense out of it. Like you just switch 100% on your partner in the face of a conflict. It didn't even matter whether it was a tiny issue or not. The switch was too bad, and I'm like, no, no, no. I didn't say no, no, no earlier. Oh. I I dealt with it for a bit until God gave me sense. You know, God touched my life with some sense, and I had to excuse myself. So the point of this video is, please, my pastor also says, you should know your non-negotiables from the get-go, from the beginning, in the beginning. Discuss what your non-negotiables are. And if it's not working, please, please, and please, don't do it. Don't try to get into a permanent journey and hope for the best. You see visible red flags, you see screaming red flags, and you jump right in, hoping for the best. Remember the driver and the passenger story I told you earlier on. Once you are on the bus, you already lost your right to negotiate. You are going to be at the mercy of the driver. So in this case, you're going to be at the mercy of your partner if you fail to negotiate important details at the get-go. I hope you find this helpful, and I think I should be bringing on more gists, You get, I know we all like this. Anyways, I'm going to sign off here. Be good, be safe. Bye.